A lot of it for me is in relation to ideas, right? So my intuition is always leading me as to what ideas to follow through with and the timing of that too. So I like to just be in my flow with all of that. So because flow is intuition and intuition is creativity.
Welcome to the Creative Chats podcast with Mike Brennan. Hey friends, welcome to another episode of Creative Chats. I'm your host, Mike Brennan. You can connect with me over on my website, which is mikebrennan.me, or over on Instagram, I'm at MikeBone. And I'm here to help transform your approach to creativity by making it fun, actionable, and essential to everyday life. Part of me doing that is hosting this podcast. I love having these conversations because it not only encourages me, but I believe it's helpful for you as a creator, no matter what it is that you're creating. We all need to hear that people are creating things, that they're having these problems to solve, and hearing what their journey looks like, not just the end results. And so these conversations dive deep into those experiences, the story, the creative process, and the product, if you will, of what it is that they are creating. We talk very specific and actionable steps. I encourage you on the front of creative entrepreneurship as well as the creative process. And my hope is that you walk away from these episodes feeling encouraged and also equipped to take next steps. Because I say this often, and I truly mean it, when you create, we all win. And along with this podcast, I've created several resources to help you create. One of those things being dailycreativehabit.com. It is a one-stop place that you can go to and find resources like the Daily Creative Habit Journal, my book, Make Fun a Habit. You can find all sorts of resources there to be able to empower you and equip you to take your next practical step. So swing by dailycreativehabit.com and even join our free Facebook group. I can't wait to see what you create today. Such a fun conversation today, friends. Oh man, this one I have my friend Christy Forsyth on the podcast. And I've known Christy for a number of years. We've kind of traveled in some of the same circles as far as conferences, events, and the entrepreneurial circles. She's the owner of Clarity by Christy, and she's just such a delight. She's a licensed mental health counselor and life coach, and does some energy healing with people, and a certified hypnotist as well. And a certified hypnotherapist. So there's a lot here to unpack. And if you're someone who you shy away from perhaps more of the spiritual things, the quote woo-woo, if you're familiar with that term, type of things, I want you to suspend that reaction and be open to our conversation today, because we talk about some of that stuff, but honestly, we talk a lot about intuition, the importance of learning to trust yourself, and how that affects our creativity. And I think this is a really big conversation to have, and I'm so thankful that we had that on the podcast today. And it's been something that has affected my life, and it was great to have a forum to be able to unpack that and talk a little bit about it from my context, from Christy's context, and how that can actually help you. She suggests some tools and some methodologies that can be helpful. And so be sure to really pay close attention. And man, such a great episode. So without further ado, I'm going to get out of the way here. Here is my creative chat with Christy Forsyth. Well, Christy, welcome to the Creative Chats podcast. I love that you're here today.
I'm so excited to be here.
You have such a great smile. You like light up the whole place wherever you are. I just love that you have this joy that emanates from you. So I'm really looking forward to our conversation today.
Me too. Thank you. I love to share the light with people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know, and we just were at the Thing event in Orlando, and got to kind of get to know each other better there. You know, we've been in the orbit for each other at various conferences and things, and online, of course. But having the opportunity to actually sit down and have some more deeper conversations and laughs, of course, it was a great time. So I look forward to kind of piggybacking on that and now kind of diving even deeper with the audience and asking these questions that I'm just curious about your journey and your process and all that good stuff.
Mhm.
But before we go too far there, just I know you do a bunch of different things, right? So you've got like different titles or different categories. And so I'm wondering when you show up, like say at a party, and you're introducing yourself, someone says, "Hey, who are you? What do you do?" Like how do you answer that? Or does it depend on like your setting?
I think it does depend on the setting. It's a tricky thing to answer, but the shortest version of how I describe what I do is I say that I'm a spiritual life coach because people seem to connect with that and understand that, but it's a little bit more complicated than that. So I am an intuitive, but I'm also a licensed mental health counselor. I'm a certified clinical hypnotherapist. I am trained in many different energy work modalities, and I bring all of that together to offer a service that I call soul therapy. So it's essentially helping people on their spiritual journey, connecting with their intuition, and to work on the greatest creative project that we have in this world, and that's ourselves, our
Yeah.
growth, our spiritual journey, our purpose. So I do a little bit of everything with people on their journey.
Yeah. So it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you take some really practical things, right? And some things that are more spiritual and not that spirituality isn't practical, but like, I think if you know what I mean, like things that maybe people would consider like woo or like, certainly more, in the spiritual realm, and then things that are more, akin to here's a pathway and a process that you walk somebody through and kind of bring those things together, right? I mean, is that fair to say?
Definitely, definitely. I love the woo, but I also understand that that's not everybody's thing. And that at the end of the day, we can break that down into something very simple. We are all spiritual beings and we all have a spiritual process. And as we tune into that and tap into that, no matter where we're at, that's always going to help us to be a better version of ourselves.
Yeah. So how did this all start for you? Like, was this something as a kid? There was something that was a kind of inciting, incident, if you will, or a catalyst moment, or you just kind of had a general interest. Like, fill us in a little bit of the backstory of like, where did this start for you?
Yeah. So I always say I've been training my whole life for this
Hmm.
because it has been something that's been very present for me at different times throughout my life. So always have seen myself as a helper. Like I can see myself, like looking back, being in the classroom with other kids and how important that was. I could feel into people. I knew what people needed. I knew where people were at. And so even when I was very young, I could feel people and help to support them in the ways that they needed. And I was doing hypnosis sessions, if you can believe it, on at the playground. I would have people like lay in my lap and I would rub their temples. I don't know what I thought I was doing, but people would allow that process. And I was doing counseling sessions and things like that. So that part was very much there. And then the intuitive part was present too. I would have these experiences as a very young child where I was having conversations with things that I later realized other people couldn't see and hear. And so I was having those experiences and feeling into energy and things like that. And so there were lots of times throughout my life where I kind of have come in and out of that intuitive connection piece where I started to connect more. And then for one reason or another, kind of close that out and refocus on being, I guess, regular is the best way to say it. But about 10 years ago now, I stepped into my spiritual awakening where I just felt this intuitive pull, this call to lean more into that. I was starting to really feel energy around people and even see energy around people and was having experiences with what I believe to be angels and all of these things. So it was it was opening up, and I was working in my role as a mental health counselor and doing sessions with people. And it just started to feel like I think I'm being led. I think my intuition is showing me that I'm supposed to be helping people in a different way now.
Mm. That's interesting. I have so many thoughts right now of like questions I want, so I'll try and tackle these systematically if I can. The first question I want to ask you is, how did you even know that this was like a possible pathway for a career? Like, did you know people growing up who were either, therapists or counselors, or was this like kind of people going like, well, you like to help people. Here's a avenue that you could explore. Like, how did that come about?
So I had experiences with helpers just through some family members that I had who had their own journey with needing help with things like that. And so I think that initially that was what started to spark my interest in that, like, oh, that might be something that I might want to do. And so it started to lead me down that journey. But I also think that stuff like this just has this way of coming out. It just has this, like, we feel it and we know it within ourselves. And so when it's time for us to be of service in some way here in this world, that there's almost like this intuitive, this creative connection where we just feel led to do those things, right? And it almost just, if we allow, the process happens naturally for you. And that was a big part of my process and my journey. And of course, like, that required some level of schooling, especially for the counseling and things like that. So, of course, like going to graduate school and all of that stuff for that. But I just like, I knew that that was what I was supposed to do.
Mm. Yeah. So was any of that, like, as you were going and in school and doing your work there, was there any opportunity for you to talk about kind of the other side of things that you've adopted and brought into it, or was it strictly more of like an academic approach to that schooling, and then afterwards you were like, hey, this is also a part of things, and on your own kind of brought those things in?
Yeah, so that was definitely more clinically focused. And even in my work as a counselor, definitely more clinically focused. And that was where, when I started to go into my awakening and feel like I'm being led to help people in a different way, I really was wanting to explore those things with people and start to do that work a little bit more with people. And I had the understanding, like, I had to do that separately. That wasn't going to be something I could explore spirituality a little bit with people in that work, but it felt, all of a sudden I felt kind of boxed in to having to do it a specific way or to follow a specific approach. And that just didn't feel like the right fit for me anymore. So I let it lead me into creating the work that I do now. And it's so interesting because a big part of the work that I do now is helping people to understand their unique energy in the world and how they show up in the world. And that's been really powerful in helping them to address what people have diagnosed them with, like in terms of mental health diagnoses and things like that, right? So all of a sudden, people are managing their energy field in the work that we're doing, and it's helping them with their anxiety disorder or their depressive disorder or different things like that. So I found that through that approach, it was actually adding this extra layer of help and support that, or several extra layers of help and support that were helping people to make progress faster. And I could compare that to my work in, the clinical field and find that actually people were making progress faster and better in the work that I'm doing now.
Yeah. And I'm sure that, like, the people that you're helping, they already have an openness to this, right? I mean, it's not like, and I would think that as you encounter people and they ask you what you do, and they're assessing, like, hey, is this a right next step for me or not? If somebody is very much, more logically driven, let's say, and in their mind, and they're not necessarily connected to the spiritual side of themselves, and they have a hard time kind of going like, I don't really understand what you're talking about. All this energy stuff, all this like, all the woo stuff, right? Um, Obviously you're very comfortable in who you are, what you do, how you help, that, is obvious. And there's a confidence there that comes across and says, yeah, this is me. And you've probably said, I'm not for everybody. And I think that everybody, whatever work you do, regardless, there's that sense of you can't help everybody. You can't be everybody for everyone. But how do you talk about things in such a way that help people understand a little bit more when maybe they don't have a basis for that? You know what I mean?
Hmm. Yeah. And first of all, I want to say that I have seen a shift, right? So when I first started to do this work, it was a lot of people that were very already spiritually connected. And this wasn't considered to be like weird stuff to them. And now I'm finding that, I mean, the world is changing and people are
Mhm.
craving that spiritual connection. People are wanting to connect intuitively. And so I'm noticing that the kind of people who are coming through my door that are scheduling sessions with me, it's very different people, right? They're just people who are in a place in their life where they just have this sense that there's more to life than this.
Mm.
And they're needing something, they're craving something, and they can't quite put their finger on it. And that's that spiritual journey. So I think that that's one of the things is that people start to have this feeling of wanting something more and they just don't know what it is, right? Like maybe they've checked off all of the boxes in their life and they've accomplished the things that they expected to accomplish, but there's just a feeling, or even in a lot of cases, a pretty strong discomfort because their spirit is saying, hey, I'm here and it's time for you to acknowledge me.
Mhm.
And even for the regular person, I think we can all connect with the idea that intuition is something that we all have and that we all connect with. This is something that is the GPS for living our best life. We can all think about situations where we had a sense of, oh, maybe I shouldn't do that. Maybe that wouldn't be a good idea or a good fit for me. And we did it anyway and we regretted it.
Mhm.
Or maybe we did listen to our intuition and we found out later that that kept us safe in some way. Or maybe we even just used it in creative projects. I find, I mean, when we're connecting with our intuition, we are really what we're using is the right side of the brain, and that's the creative mind. And so much of creativity and intuition are one and the same because we're using that part of the mind. So for so many of the creatives that are listening here, they might think about like, where do my ideas come from? Where have my
Mhm.
best ideas come from? Where have I created the most success for myself? And so often that's tuning into that intuition, which doesn't have to be this magical and mystical and woo thing. It's just this tool that we all have within us that's helping us to make better decisions, faster decisions, to understand people, to connect with people. And it just becomes this thing that we were always meant to connect with that can guide us.
Yeah. This idea of intuition is really fascinating because there is a sense of like you need to trust yourself in order to step into that. Can you speak into that? Like how, if somebody's wrestling with this idea of like going, I'm not sure that I know what intuition looks like for me, and maybe I want to pursue that, but I don't know that I trust myself. Where do they go from there?
I love that question because that's exactly what intuition is
Mm.
trusting yourself and honoring yourself. And that is the biggest barrier that I see in terms of people honoring their intuition is just simply that they don't trust it.
Hmm.
I think that there's a lot of ways that we can start with that, but one of the best places to start is to look backwards and to look at experiences that we've had in our life and identify times in our life that we either just knew something or we had a feeling about something or we had an idea that seemed to come out of nowhere that was really helpful, those kind of things. And when we take a look at those things, then we can ask ourselves, how did I know that?
Mm.
What did I feel? What did that look like for me? Because then it gives you some kind of a sense as to how you uniquely intuitively connect, because we all connect in different ways. And so when you do that, you can start to recognize what it feels like moving forward when you're having an intuitive thought versus, for example, a fear-based thought.
Hmm. Yeah.
And that'll give you a really good sense of how you're built with that. And also, I think that oftentimes, if we can just kind of feel into the ideas that are coming through or the thoughts that are coming through and get a sense of how does that feel, that can be really helpful too. So intuition will oftentimes feel pretty neutral, especially when that thought first comes through. And fear-based thoughts will feel very, very fearful. They will, a lot of times what happens for people with intuition is they will have that intuitive hit, that intuitive prompt, and it's very neutral and it comes through. And then pretty quickly, they talk themselves out of it.
Hmm.
Now,
Yeah.
for one reason or another. So, we don't have the confidence in ourselves, or we have been taught not to trust our intuition, because I think that that's not something that's always valued here in society, or whatever the reason is, but we can talk ourselves out of it. So I think another place to start is, what was my first response to the situation? What was my first response to the person? What was my first response to that idea that came through? What was my first response when I asked myself, what is it that I want to do in this situation? Or what is it that's best in this situation? And that typically is going to help you to connect to your intuition, because a lot of times intuition is very instinctual.
Hmm.
You catch it before you talk yourself out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's so true, right? Because so many times the thing that happens is we overthink everything. We overanalyze. And then that blocks us from actually taking action or listening to and following through with that initial prompt. And I love the way that you're talking about this, because it's so it's so grounded. And I think at face value, someone may think of the word intuition and think like, "Ooh, that sounds like very mystical, very woo, whatever." But really, the way you're talking about it is like look at these, look for the clues, look for the look in the past, see what's happened, see how you've responded, see what seems natural for you. It's funny because I think of this in terms of like color, the use of color. So for me, being a visual artist, I've had training and I've done things where it's taught me technique. I've done color theory. I've done all these different things in the past. And yet something emerged for me where I didn't have to think about certain choices anymore because they just seem to be intuitive, right? So for me, choosing colors, knowing what it is that I like, knowing kind of on a gut level of why I like them, and going, this is me, this is my style, this is my voice, this is what I want to use. And me believing that when I do that and I'm being true to myself, I will produce better work, and work that will actually speak to people, other people, not just me, right? And so there's so much there, so many layers of that. And yet, like, it's funny because the other side of intuition, I think, is we can be so close to something that we don't tend to see the value in it as much because it's just, well, that's just something I do. It's just, it comes so easy to me, or it's so natural for me. Why is that even a point of discussion? I mean, it's right. I mean, have you seen that for people wrestling with that side of things as well?
Sure. I think that we all naturally are intuitive in our own ways. And so sometimes that's so close to us, it's hard for us to recognize. And so that's where like that looking back and asking yourself, how did I know? And breaking that down can be really helpful in understanding how you uniquely connect with your intuition.
Mm, yeah.
It helps to show you that. But yes, I also believe that when we're really close to certain things, it can give us these blind spots with our intuition. And
Yeah.
so there are times where we don't recognize things. I think that when we make the effort, though, on a regular basis to consciously choose to tune in with ourselves and to listen, we're going to catch those blind spots. We're not necessarily going to miss those blind spots. We're going to let ourselves be led, but it has to be that conscious choice because we live in a busy world. Our time, energy being pulled in so many different directions all the time. And so it's really easy to ignore how we intuitively connect all the time. And to just feel completely disconnected from that. So I think in order to honor that and to deepen that connection to our intuition so it can be leading us on our best life, we have to consciously make those efforts now to intuitively connect. Maybe like in a time where it wasn't like this, where we have our attention being pulled in so many different directions, it was easier, for example, to sit by a body of water and just watch the waves and let that be a way that people connect with their intuition. Because I certainly think that time in nature is one of those things that we can do, or to have that time and that space to just quietly connect with ourselves in some way, I think was more of a natural process before. But today, we have to be consciously aware of that and make it a priority so that we can hear that voice. Because I always say the voice of fear is very, very loud. And the voice of intuition is much more subtle. It's much more quiet. And so we have to make that effort to listen to it.
Yeah. And if our world and our heads and everything around us is always so noisy, there's a good possibility we're going to miss the opportunities to hear and to pay attention to that intuition, right? I'm wondering too, like, do you think intuition is the type of thing where it's in a certain area for someone, or is it something that kind of grows and can encompass more parts of your life as you grow and as you listen to this? You know what I mean by that? Like for me, let's say the color example, that is something that's very intuitive for me. That process, that whole choosing and how I use that. Now, is that like, okay, for me as a person, as an artist, that's what that looks like and it's kind of set? Or is it the type of thing where, well, the more you pay attention to those kind of things, not just there, but in other areas, the more that can develop or encompass other areas of my life? Do you follow the question?
Mm-hmm. I think that it's something that we can work toward allowing it to lead every single aspect of our lives. And it can just be this process that's here that we just work with. I find myself working with it all day, every day. And I just kind of let it lead my process from the simplest things. For example, like to what I'm feeding my body, right? I'm listening to my intuition and listening, what does my body feel like it needs today? What should I be fueling it with today? To making major life decisions, I'm connecting with my intuition for that. And so I think that it can be expansive in those ways when we're making that effort to connect, because when you're making that effort to connect, it doesn't just say, oh, I'm only going to help you when you're creating. I'm only going to help you when you're in that process. We can apply that to other things, and you're going to notice that it'll show up in other things, right? So, so an example just from what you shared, you might start to get a sense of what people's energy is like, who you might feel more drawn to and what they might help you with, or what you might work together with, or whatever. Based on, you might identify them intuitively as colors, for example, like, oh, that person is a yellow, and in yellow for me means this, right? And you might just like get a feeling that a yellow person is the kind of person that you might collaborate really well with in life, or whatever, right? So you could apply it into that, but it can also be much more general. It can be, as I learn to trust and listen to my intuition as I'm creating something, then I can start to apply that trust in other areas of my life. So when I feel something outside of that, I get a sense of a step I should take, or something I should say, or something I should do outside of that. If I start to lean into that and I start to trust that a little bit more, that's going to start to apply to different areas of your life too.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Deepening the trust of yourself, and that can lead to not just what you're working on, and like you said, or the people you surround yourself with, the risks you take, the path you decide to go down for certain things, whether it's relationships, whether it's career, whether, all those different things. Yeah, I can see how that sense of trusting yourself, listening to that intuition. I mean, we've all had those experiences where we're like, I should have listened to my gut. I said I wasn't going to work with this type of person, or I said, something felt off about this in the beginning and I ignored it, because there was like, I needed the money or I needed the whatever, or I was having moments of, panic or doubt or whatever. And I pushed through. And now on the other side, I'm kicking myself going, why didn't I listen to myself? Right.
But that's the thing is like, we usually know. It's pretty rare that we don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we can look at that and we can learn from that too. It's all just learning. It's all part of the journey. And so we can learn from that and we can say, okay, the next time that comes up in my experience, I'm going to honor that. I'm going to listen to that because as I said, the biggest disconnect for people with intuition is that they simply don't trust it. So it's not that we don't know. It's not that we don't have some sense of that. It's more that we don't trust it. And so it's really a relationship that we're creating with ourselves and with our higher power. And so as we say, you know what? I have this feeling, and a lot of intuitions are, I don't know why, but, right? So I don't know why, but I have this feeling, I have this sense, I had this thought, I know this thing, I'm having this weird response to the situation, and I'm going to choose to honor what that is and make a decision from that place. So every single time that you do that, you start to trust yourself more. And you start to build that relationship with yourself. And every time that you lean into that, you start to build a deeper connection with your higher power because you're kind of saying, hey, I don't have necessarily all of the logical information to support this decision that I'm making, but I'm feeling it and I'm feeling some kind of guidance or leadership from myself and from you. So I'm going to lean into this. And as we do that and we start to see, hey, this is really leading me in a better direction. And I've just saved myself potentially a whole lot of trouble and also created a great situation for myself. I'm moving in a good direction. Then we start to have a deeper connection with our higher power too, because we start to go, you know what? The universe really has my back. God's really looking out for me. There's something that's greater than me that wants to support my journey, that's helping to show me every step of the way what to do from the simplest of tasks to the biggest of decisions. I'm being led and I'm being guided. And that is such a blessing and such a gift when people can get to that place. It's my favorite part in the work that I do when they come to me and they say, Christy, God's real. And I'm like, yeah, I know. I know, right? And so they get to that place where it's just this understanding. I really am supported and I never came here to do this alone. I don't have to create alone. I don't have to live my life alone. I don't have to do any of it alone because I'm supported and guided every single step of the way. And my job is just to listen and to honor it as it comes through. And once we start to like flex those faith muscles a little bit at a time, it starts to get easier. And we start to pick up on the subtleties within the intuition too, and start to feel it.
Yeah. We've talked a bunch kind of in terms of creativity and intuition, maybe more creativity in terms of like making decisions and following something. But would you maybe indulge us a little bit in what does that look like for you in terms of being intuitive and following creativity and a creative process, or what types of creative things are you making?
So a lot of it for me is in relation to ideas, right? So my intuition is always leading me as to what ideas to follow through with and the timing of that too. So I like to just be in my flow with all of that. So because flow is intuition and intuition is creativity, right? So I will have so many times when I'm just kind of busy doing something else or focused on something else, and I just get what I call an intuitive hit. And it's like, you need to do this, you need to create this now, whether it's I need to write this post for Facebook, Instagram, social media, whether I need to film a video and share whatever ideas, whatever thoughts are coming through. And so a lot of times it looks like that, where it's just coming through in the form of ideas and giving me a sense of like, no, you've got to do this now. Because a lot of times intuition too is the timing of things.
Mm.
And I'm sure you've had those
Oh
experiences
yeah.
going to create something. You're like, no, I got to do this now. And I'm feeling that pressure, like good pressure. And you just feel this inspiration and this excitement. So I have that happen a lot where it's like, oh, nope, I've pulled my car over and been like, nope, I've got to write this right now because those ideas are coming through. In fact, a lot of my creative ideas, and I find this for a lot of people, come through when I'm busy doing other things, because I say a lot of times intuition will come through the back door, right? When we're trying to like consciously think of an answer or connect with something, a lot of times we're using the logical part of the mind. And so we almost have to let our guard down with that and let that go in order to allow intuition and creativity to come through. And so for me, a lot of times I'll be in the shower or I will
Hmm.
be driving somewhere and again have to pull over. You should see my notes in my phone. It's just like constant. And even like sometimes coming out of the shower to make sure like, oh, I have to write that down immediately right now. I have to acknowledge that so that I can honor that. Or even when we're just having those moments when I'm working out, I get so many intuitive hits because I'm just in a flow with things. And so I find a lot of times intuition will come through too when we're in a flow with things.
Mm.
And so pay attention when you're in those states, whatever you can get caught in a flow with and sort of get lost in, because a lot of times that's intuitive gold in the mix of that. Whatever those ideas are, or whatever you're feeling called to create in that time, it's that.
It's funny. I appreciate you sharing your context there because, you know, I've certainly experienced that. And to hear somebody else is experiencing that too, it kind of validates a little bit too, right? But also like I'm thinking about how the connection piece of like practicing intuition, gaining that trust with yourself, understanding that can help feed that moment for you to actually pause whatever you're doing and to make sure that you're like, oh, I got to write that post. I have to do that thing now, the timing of it, to make sure that you actually do that, as opposed to seeing that as an intrusion and going, this is me being distracted. This is, my ADHD, or this is my whatever, right? Like, which can be a very real thing. I'm not trying to minimize that at all. But what I'm saying is I think too often we may automatically reach for that when that might not always be the case. And we may miss an opportunity to create something in that moment. Like you described that experience. And for me, it almost feels like something's being downloaded. Like,
Mhm.
oh, okay, I've got this thing I want to say, this post I'm writing, I'm feeling inspired. And if I don't capture this now, yes, it is going to go away. I'm going to forget. I'm going to get distracted. I'm not going to feel as connected with the idea anymore. And so if I don't do something with that right now, it is going to dissipate. And so those times when I do indulge that and say, I'm going to trust my intuition on this, I'm going to step into it. And then it's starting to download, it formulates, it grows into something more than maybe what the initial idea was. And I'm creating something that maybe 20 minutes ago wasn't even on my radar at all, which is a pretty incredible thing, right?
Mhm.
I mean,
Absolutely.
and do you think the more that, again, that type of thing happens, the more that you say yes to it, the more you practice it, the more you'll start experiencing those things?
Yes, absolutely. I think that as we start to honor it, that's part of that relationship building that we're doing with ourselves, right? We're saying, oh, I'm acknowledging that this is coming through and that this is important. And so by honoring that right then and there in that moment, in some way, shape, or form, we're deepening that relationship. And I find as we deepen that relationship, more and more will come, right? This is how we build on that. So that can be a really helpful strategy to use to deepen that connection to the intuition. The more you honor it in whatever way that comes through, the more you're going to get.
Yeah. I think there's also like a value piece in there too, right? Like in terms of how you see yourself, if you struggle with your own value, you're not going to think that maybe what you create can make a difference, or maybe that disconnect of what you see and what you're able to actually execute, that gap is huge. And so that introduces doubt. All those things kind of tear away at the intuition, and those times when this is an opportunity for me to learn to trust myself and to actually see the value that's already there. Not that I have to prove it, not that I have to strive for this or earn it, but that it's already there because of who I am, who I've been created to be, like those kind of things. I think if someone's struggling with that sense of, I just don't know, I don't know my own value, I think that's even harder, right? Like, I mean, would you agree? And how do you address that level of things for people too? Like, do you go that deep to go, okay, let's identify this at the core of it and then work our way out? Or do you kind of start at the out and then go in? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that we start with, I think it's helpful to sort of have an understanding of that, right? That may be a block in that is difficult. I think it's difficult for a lot of people to trust themselves. And so certainly we might do some work around that. But I think a lot of the work with that too is the choice to do it anyway. Right. Even if they feel nervous about that, even if they feel scared, because I find that as I have these conversations with people, they still know what they're meant to do. They're just afraid. And I say just, like, fear is a very real thing, and that can be very difficult to work through. But a lot of times we know what to do. And I think also a lot of times we don't know where the destination is that this GPS for our soul is taking us to, right? Well, we have a sense of that we're being led in a direction, but we just don't know what that direction is or exactly what that looks like. So I think a lot of people too get caught up in that big picture of that. Well, I know that I feel that I need to take this step, but I have no idea where that's leading me or where that's going. And in my experience, that's how intuition works anyway. I always say it's like breadcrumbs on a trail, right?
Mm.
And so we just usually typically get that next breadcrumb. And so it's step by step, a little bit at a time. So even for people who are really having a hard time with that, if they can just lean into that next breadcrumb, if they can just take whatever that step is, and a lot of times that step will be, I don't know why, but I feel like I need to do this, or I had this thought that I needed to do this. And it might feel like it completely came out of left field for them in their life, but it's a thought that maybe comes to the surface again and again and again. And it could be something very simple that has nothing to do with the problems or seemingly has nothing to do with the problems that are surfacing in their life or the challenges that they have going on. But when they start to honor that, then it takes them to the next step. And then they become clear that they're getting another, what I would call an intuitive prompt of an action step that they might take, or something that they might say, do, explore, whatever. And so then if they honor that, it takes them to the next step. And so all of a sudden we start to see, oh, there's a road developing here, but we're taking a lot of these steps blindly. Mm-hmm. Using only the intuition, using only that trust and that faith in something bigger than us to support us as we lean into this direction. So I think it's about just starting that process of leaning in. And then somewhere along the way, the trust builds, the confidence builds, because you have to kind of start somewhere. And so it may not be this giant leap of faith for somebody where you're making this massive life change. Again, it could be just the tiniest thing. It could start with, I don't know why, but I feel like I need to mix these colors, and these colors are what feel right to me today. And it's helping me to create this thing. And maybe that was something that needed to be expressed for you that day. Or maybe it was working on a piece that is going to massively transform other people's lives. We don't know, but we just know that as we lean into that it's doing something good for us on our journey.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that you use these two words, clarity. And of course, clarity is the name of your business. But clarity and action. And I've I've often thought about this and talked about this and how so often we want clarity before we take action, but really clarity comes when we take action, and usually after we take action, right? Because we're deciding, and in the context of this conversation, we're listening to that intuition, which is causing us to take action, which is then causing us to see something happen, which is then clarifying some things for us and going, oh, this is what this looks like, or this is why I'm doing this, or this is why I shouldn't do this, or there's some kind of data or information, some revelation, some experience that happens that helps us get closer in understanding what's happening. And then we just keep that pathway going, as you said, taking another step and another step. So I love that connection of just the action and the clarity and the intuition all coming together with creativity. It's like this nice little, like here's something. And again, I hesitate to use the word practical because I don't want it to sound like other things aren't. But for someone who resonates with a process, I'm a deeply process oriented person. That feels more accessible to me, and it's helpful because I know that there's something happening. It's not just this like wide open, like, I don't know what's going to happen now. We're just kind of like, all bets are off. This could go sideways in a minute. Like, I don't know. There's no plan. There's no great, this is more manageable. This is more, it helps in the conversation with the fear also, I think. Because then it doesn't seem so unattainable or so far away from maybe where you actually are. But it's helping introduce going, no, listen to that intuition, take those next steps, take action, let clarity come, then reflect and think about this. I love this. Are there other tools that you use to help people in gaining some clarity and helping them through this process where they may be like, okay, listen to my intuition, figure this part out for me. How do I do this? Like, what else would you suggest?
I think for any issue that we're navigating in our lives, whether we're trying to figure out where we're going creatively, or we're trying to navigate a problem, or we are having that feeling where there's something more to life and we know that there's something that we're meant to connect with, it all comes down to that intentional connection. And so some form of meditation for people is what I always recommend, because it's going to allow us to connect. And, not everybody is built to do that, the Buddhist meditation, right, where they're sitting lotus style and they can spend hours every day doing that. That's not even, in my opinion, realistic for most people's lives, right? And so that would be fantastic if we had that available to us. But I always recommend what I call freestyle meditation. And so that's figuring out, how do we uniquely meditate here in this world? Like, how do we naturally do it already? And just trying to be more intentional in putting more time into it. So, as I said, a lot of my meditation comes in the form of when I'm moving my body in some way. So when I'm at the gym, also big time, I go for a lot of hikes. When I'm spending time in the woods specifically, I get the best information, the best intuitive prompts when I'm doing that. And also just taking that time to really, even just a moment in our day and just tuning in with ourselves. How am I feeling right now? How does my body feel? Our body is our greatest intuitive tool. And so often we're not even paying attention to, am I feeling too hot? Am I feeling too cold? Am I feeling too tired to be here today? Like, a lot of times we're not even listening to that and honoring that. And so as we just start to just check in, and how do I feel? And how do I feel in this situation with this person, right? How does that make me feel? How do I feel every time I walk away from that person? Do I feel amazing? Do I feel uplifted? Do I feel like I've been filled with light? Or does it feel like it's drained me of every ounce of energy that I have? That's telling you something, right? Yeah. That's an indicator that maybe some changes, some boundaries, some adjustments need to be made. And so it's like paying attention to how we connect. For a lot of people probably listening here, it's through whatever that creative process is for them, whether they're writing, whether they're painting, I mean, whatever that is. So many different ways that we can be creative, but that's why I said the intuition is creativity, because when we are in a creative process, we are intuitively connecting. I watch it with my kids. My kids love to play with Legos, and they can build the most incredible things with Legos, right? And I watch them go into this meditative flow with it and build these things. And I'm like, wow, how did you do that? That's amazing, right? And so they're meditating, they're connecting with any downloads, as you call them, coming through when they're doing that. And I think all of these ways, however we connect, it gives us this avenue to connect and to listen and to tune out all of the noise. And I think just also making sure that we're carving out time and space for that.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe
Yeah.
it's driving the car for you. And so even just having planned drives in your day or something without putting this pressure on, we have to connect with any kind of an answer, but more just kind of letting the process and just being in the intention of it, being in the action of that and seeing if anything comes or not. And so when we kind of just work those into our day, into our life, and then see what happens, I find a lot of times people deepen that connection to themselves, build that trust in themselves, and definitely are deepening that connection to their intuition.
Yeah. I've often talked about that sense of going for a drive or going for a walk in nature or those kind of things is as embracing play and experimentation, having some fun, because that, like you said, kind of takes the pressure off and allows you to enter a place that is different, where perhaps you're more open and things can come to you in a way that wouldn't normally, because if you're trying to solve a problem and you keep pushing, and it's not coming, you need to do something different. You need to give your brain a break and put yourself in a different state where you are more open to ideas, and perhaps there's an intuitive solution that you've been blocking because you keep thinking, no, it has to look like this. It has to be this. It has to be this timing. It has to be this budget. It has to be this, and there may be another solution that is right there, but we just haven't made room for it. And so making room for it. I love that you've used the words intention and purpose, like those things also very much rooted in this creative process as well. So that's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
I know that we've just barely scratched the surface of things that you do and how you help people. And obviously we're talking with creativity in mind for this podcast. But if someone's been listening to our conversation and they're like, oh, this is awesome, I need more of this, I need to connect with Christy, can you tell us, where can people connect with you? I know you have an offer for people today. Give us some information, some links and some details.
Yeah, so they can connect with pretty much everything of mine on my website at claritybychristy.com. My handle on almost everything except for Facebook is at Christy Clarity. And the offer that I have really builds nicely on what we were talking about in terms of being intentional in tuning in with ourselves and going within, because I have my most recent offer is the Upgrade Your Life Hypnosis recording bundle, because I'm a hypnotherapist too. And I love to use hypnosis to put people into that meditative state, into that deep, relaxed state, because so many people struggle to get into it. So I created this bundle to do that quickly for people, because again, we don't have time, right? We're all busy.
Yep.
To do that quickly. And it's addressing so many of the issues that people gave me feedback on that they were needing help with. So, upgrading their career, upgrading their finances, upgrading their relationships, upgrading their confidence, these kind of things. And it's a whole bundle. And I have that all up on my website.
Awesome. And I know you also do a lot of lives and you're always sharing information even freely. I appreciate that about you and see that often as I'm on Facebook and I'm like, ooh, I got a couple of minutes. Let me tune in. Let me see what she's saying now. So I appreciate that about you, that you're very giving. You're very helpful. Obviously, that's a core motivation of yours. And so thank you for spending this time with us today. Thank you for having this conversation. And I just know that every time that we connect, there's going to be smiles. There's going to be some deep conversations, some thought-provoking things happening. And so thank you for the work that you do. Thank you for showing up as you do, and for the resources that you provide for other people.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you back for that, because you're doing that for people too. And thank you for inviting me to be here.
Thanks for listening today. I'd appreciate it if you would subscribe, leave a rating and a review. It really helps this podcast be seen and heard by others.